Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, True Grizz. This is written by Douglas H. Chadwick, subtitle Glimpses of Fernie, Star, Easy, Dakota, and Other Real Bears in the Modern World. I picked this book out for a couple reasons, actually. One of which is that the back cover has a quote from another author, an author that may seem familiar, Rick Bass. I've done 3 books of Rick Bass's so far, and it attributes him to The 9 Mile Wolves, which is the most recent book of his that I have covered. Which is to say that I covered it more recently than the other 2 books. It's one of his older books. The praise reads, Doug Chadwick is one of our country's most eloquent and compassionate and informed biologists, a core of wisdom and experience. His observations and insights illuminate the shadows of a wilder, though vanishing, natural world. Like the threatened grizzlies of the northern Rockies, about which he writes so beautifully, Chadwick himself is a national treasure. Please read this book. Produced and distributed by University of California Press and published by Sierra Club Books. Sierra Club and Sierra Club Books and the Sierra Club design logos are registered trademarks of the Sierra Club. And the cover design is by Elizabeth Watson. The front cover photograph is by Art Wolf. Now, the Sierra Club is a club created by John Muir, who is famous for his effort in establishing Yosemite National Park. I purchased this book for $6, and it is almost immaculate. There's no dog-eared pages, there's no marks of wear and tear, there's no notes in here. It is very well kept. This copy came with a receipt in it that reads Montana House, West Glacier, Montana, and it looks like whoever left this receipt in here made a purchase at 3 p.m. on September 29th, 2007. So I assume that's how old this copy is. And now that I look at the information in the front cover, it says copyright 2003 by Douglas H. Chadwick. This is a first edition book. This book is really interesting because, like 9 Mile Wolves, it takes place in northern Montana. And similarly to 9 Mile Wolves, it follows the story of named animals, named predators. In this case, far more powerful and far more dangerous to the public. These animals are the grizzly bears. Grizzlies are huge. They are bears, which means they're versatile. They can eat basically anything, and with their size and strength, if they smell food, they're going to try really hard to get that food. This book covers Chadwick's efforts to haze bears that are encroaching upon human settlement. There's a couple things here that a casual viewer may not understand about that statement, so I'll break it down further. To use Los Angeles as an example, in Los Angeles, there are frequent stories about mountain lions in the foothills, whether it's near Hollywood or whether it's near one of the mountains on the northern end, where mountain lions used to and still do live in mostly wild areas. But as the city has expanded, humans have expanded into those wild areas more and more regularly. And in this case, the case of True Grizz, A similar thing is happening at the time of this book being written in northwestern Montana. Specifically, that humans are expanding suburbs and housing developments and ranch homes further and further into the wilderness, and bears do what bears do, which is they play in the fields, they dig deep holes for ant colonies, prairie dogs, burrowing animals of any sort. And if they smell food, they're going to get it. And that's what leads them into human living spaces. What leads Doug Chadwick to be involved is that his region at this time was given permission, given funding to try something new in wildlife conservation. He was given permission to, instead of just shooting problem bears, to try and haze them, to relocate them, to do whatever they could to make the bears uncomfortable going into human settlement. And so these bears that the book follows are bears that are smelling dog food left out on the porch or in the garage instead of secured locations. And they're going there and eating dog food. They're eating all sorts of other foods left out. They are eating trash. They are eating anything they can get their hands on. See, a bear, when it is getting close to hibernation, will put on multiple pounds of weight per day. They are just engorging themselves because when they're hibernating, which in this region lasts almost 6 months out of the year, they're not moving around, and just sleeping, just maintaining their health burns a lot of energy. Those bears fatten themselves up because they need to be able to survive the winter. Chapter 2 on page 23 opens with the title, Teaching Grizzlies a Thing or Two. Tim Manley works for Montana's Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in the northwestern part of the state. He spends most of his time in the Flathead watershed, which starts practically in free fall off the Continental Divide. One of his main responsibilities is educating wild bears. This can be a chore. Tagging along as a reporter for the first time in early October of 1998, I asked him when he last had a day off, and he sat there pondering away in his pickup truck, stumped. He couldn't remember his last night off either. Finally, he just put the rig in gear and drove on to find the next bear in need of instruction. The case they're discussing is, in this early part of chapter 2, a woman that is providing bird feed so that she can see birds collecting in her front yard. But birdseed is food, and bears smell it, and it's incredibly easy, high-protein food that they can find. And so they find a reward of corn, oil-rich sunflower seeds, and nice blueberry suet for coming on my lawn. Human structures and activities mean easy food, get it? Of course, she wasn't aware that she was communicating anything of the sort. And this is specifically the woman in the bedroom that they're talking about, the woman who is planting this food out there. She merely wanted to watch birds and had been regularly putting out treats for them around her house near the town of Ferndale, where the lower Swan River Valley broadens to merge with the greater Flathead Valley. She probably thought of herself as a wildlife benefactress. With the onset of autumn, grizzlies enter a state known as hyperphagia. It means feeding in overdrive. They need to consume 20,000 to 30,000 calories and put on 2 or 3 pounds daily for at least a couple of months. Otherwise, they might not have sufficient energy reserves to see them through a denning period that, like the snowpack, can last half the year. These are the struggles they have to put up with. I'm going to read a section now about one of the bears. At some point in time, Star, a mother, has a couple cubs and they end up in a trap. He picks up here, partly because the species reproduces adequately in captivity, and partly because human-caused deaths in the wild leave numerous orphans to be taken in, zoos and similar display facilities have a surplus of Grizz. There were no takers for Star and her young. Hunt was deeply discouraged. Even with all the structures she ripped up, everyone in the North Fork still wanted these bears kept alive, she insisted. We found out a lot of people weren't reporting damage for fear Star would be taken away and killed. That worked against us all along, trying to teach her. Damn it, we had her practically being a wild bear again last year. She needed some touching up this summer, a little concentrated booster work, but there was no funding. We couldn't keep on her, and she slipped back. In 5 years, this is the first bear the program has dealt with extensively that has had to be put down. Look at those healthy, vibrant cubs. They have to die, and Star must die, because we lacked the money to maintain our position as dominant bears. Every time Hunt looked over at the culvert trap, she saw a failure, and she was taking it personally. She believed so strongly in what she was doing that I'm not sure she could accept the fact that some individual bears, like some people, may be too hard-headed to respond to attempts to reform them. Those are the stakes in this book. These people, these biologists, are incredibly passionate about their work, but if the bear doesn't learn to avoid human spaces, it's going to fall into the same trap. And when that happens and there are no sanctuaries willing to take those bears have to be put to death. Later, however, a couple pages later, it turns out that a home had become available for Star and her cubs. The news was not cause for joy, as the family would forever be incarcerated, but it did bring a palpable sense of relief to the crew sticking around at Manly's to help out. The bears would soon be on their way to Pullman, Washington, where Charles Robbins of Washington State University would use them in studies of bear physiology and nutrition. The book ends with this statement: "The only things I feel fairly certain about are that every simplistic image of these fellow mammals and every blanket solution for how to relate to them reveals limitations on our part more than on theirs, and that while we may ultimately discover much of what we need to know through scientific data and logic using our heads, the heart is sometimes a truer field guide." And then on the last page is a note that says, "A portion of the author's proceeds from this book will go to Vital Ground, a small nonprofit group that safeguards habitat for grizzlies and other North American wildlife through strategic land purchases and conservation easements. For more information or to make a donation, contact Vital Ground, P.O. Box 982003, Park City, Utah 84098, or www.vitalground.org. That website still exists, and the main cover photo of it is a mother grizzly with her cub in a field of grass and flowers. It's one of those things where sometimes I regret that I find these books secondhand, because some of these nature writing books are like this, where portions of the proceeds are donated instead to programs to help those animals. I paid for this book for $6. It had to have been used and read, and that money had to have gone to that nonprofit, but I feel like almost guilty that I read this book, I purchased this book, but I didn't do my part as well. So I have half a mind to donate a few dollars to Vital Ground. This book is really worth it. I paid $6, but knowing that I could have also helped a nonprofit dedicated to helping these bears stay alive and have wilderness made for them, I wish I would have bought it new. And I think if any of this nature writing in the past, The Lost Grizzlies, 9 Mile Wolves, Heart of a Lion, any of these books interests you, then this book, True Grizz, will interest you as well. I would encourage you to find it new, But if you find it used, I would instead encourage you to give a portion of that amount to the nonprofit group Vital Ground. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this book. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.